Okay, so good morning, everyone. Oh, sorry, it's good afternoon. It's 12. While everyone's coming in, I'm just gonna go and take a page from Gary's book and ask you a really quick question, Christine, just to break the ice. And that
Sure.
is, yeah, since I'm a really big movie buff, like what movie do you wish you could watch again for the first time?
Ooh, that's
Yeah,
so hard.
I know.
I'm gonna like totally show my age on this one, and say Titanic, which sounds like such a cliche, but like I was in the generation that got to like see it in the movie theater when it first
Oh,
came out,
wow.
and
Okay.
it was like such an experience on the big screen for the first time. So,
I love that. That's great. Like if you'd ask me, I would have to say like I really love Now You See Me, the movie with Jesse Eisenberg, like the magic
yeah.
one. Yeah, no, that's
There's
really fun.
so many good ones. My husband and I just watched The Wolf of Wall Street again, like a
Ooh.
week or so ago. I'm like, I don't know what the Leonardo DiCaprio theme is that I just started creating for myself, but yeah, so there's so many good
Oh
ones.
yeah. Yeah, you can't really help it with all the movies coming out. Okay, so again, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us for another episode of TPN Tax Talks, Energy Improvements and Other Capital Expenditures Deductions. So my name, you first time seeing me, is Cheska Cordero, and I will be your host for today. And we'll be getting the high-level overview of what preparers need to know and how to quickly answer client questions this tax season about energy improvement credits and capital expenditure deductions with the lovely Christine Gervais. I will have her introduce herself after I cover a few of the housekeeping items, which are there is no CPE for this. It's just a 30-minute webinar. If you have questions, we ask you to put them in the Q&A panel and be specific. You can't just ask, like, what do you mean by that? You gotta ask, like, Christine, what did you mean by I really like Titanic? So that's mainly because she might not get to it immediately or right after you put it there. And we'll also be sending you a link to the recording, and it's also going to be up on our YouTube page within about 24 hours. I'll also be putting the link to the YouTube channel in our chat, and as well as a copy of the slide deck. And with that, Christine, welcome, and thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. All right, so always the hardest part of the whole session is me getting my screen share here and getting the slides up. Okay. So welcome everyone. As Cheska mentioned, I will keep the Q&A and the chat box open while we go through the presentation. So any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to pop them in that Q&A box and I will do my best to answer them as quickly as possible. The slide deck copy is up in that chat. So if you want to go ahead and download your copy of the slides, that is there and available for you. I am going to just pop right in. So just a heads up, still a few months away, but I always like to just let everybody know what is coming next. If you want to save the date, our next Future Forward virtual event is going to be December 5th and 6th. 2 days of virtual CPE. You can see the topics right there, niches, trends, and predictions of 2024. I will be doing a presentation on integrating AI into your practice. So if you want to mark those dates, that's what's coming up. And if you want to make sure that you're never missing out on our newsletter content when our next webinar is, you can go right ahead and scan the QR code and make sure that you are subscribed to Insightful Accountant and Tax Practice News. Awesome. So thank you. I know many of you join me on a monthly basis, but if this is your first time here and we have never met, my name is Christine Gervais. I've been a licensed CPA for going on almost 15 years now. I run my own practice where we do primarily outsource and white label tax preparation and consulting. But I have a pretty eclectic background. So I've worked for firms, I've run my own firm, I've worked as a controller, and I really have used that experience to try to know what all of your pain points are in dealing with your clients and running your practices and make sure that we're bringing the best of that content to you on a monthly basis. So that being said, diving into today's topic, we are talking about energy credits and deductions. I will be the first person to tell you that I have always felt like I'm not super strong with these. And I think that's because there's one, so many of them, and two, that they're changing very frequently. So anytime a client asks me a question about an energy efficient, tax deduction, a home improvement tax credit, anything of that nature, I feel like my response always has to be, let me look that up because I'm not 100% sure. And so today, the goal is to try to get you up to speed with what's available for 2023, what's the latest and greatest in terms of these credits and deductions, so that you can be a little bit more proactive with your clients. And then I also have some suggestions about how to make this a little bit easier for you and your team to be able to answer those questions and have some quick go-to guides to get that information over to your clients. I certainly think that these are great tax planning tools and strategies. I'm always surprised when I proactively ask the question how many of my clients are actually doing improvements or things like that in their houses or their businesses that they didn't necessarily even know may have qualified. And so they're always happy to hear that they get a tax break for those. So you can see the link that I put up right here on the slide. Again, these are in the slide deck. So if you want to make sure you save this, go ahead and download the slide deck from the chat. I'm just going to direct you back right to the IRS website. If there's questions that I can't answer, or you want to do a deeper dive into any one of these credits, what qualifies, how do your clients take advantage of them, this is going to be a key resource for you. And I do have a couple of other links throughout the slide deck to try to point you in the right direction if you do need more information on everything. So just very high level, because again, today we only have 30 minutes. These are the types of residential energy credits that you can be thinking about and asking your clients about, or just know off the top of your head that if someone does say, hey, I put in new windows and doors this year, or I put in a new heat pump or a new air conditioner, is that going to potentially qualify for a credit? The answer is probably yes. So again, these are specifically residential credits that we're looking at first. We will look at business opportunities for tax savings in a minute. And these are just some really key examples. So there's other things that may still qualify in terms of your clients doing improvements to their homes. But these are some key things where people are frequently, replacing windows, doors, ACs, heat pumps, water heaters, furnaces, insulation. Those are all kind of common expenditures that might qualify your client for a tax credit. And so we want to be proactive about having that conversation with them. So just notes for 2023, the home improvements that we're talking about, they have to be improvements to your client's existing home. So what this doesn't qualify for is a new build. So if your client just built a brand new house and it has all of these beautiful energy efficient things, that's awesome, but it does not qualify for the tax credit. So it has to be additions to an existing home. The home does have to be located in the United States, and your client will potentially get a credit of up to 30% of their cost of the improvement, limited to $3,200. And these limits and percentages kind of change by the type of improvement as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute also, but just again, emphasizing that if you're looking at something for a specific client, like a heat pump versus an AC, highly recommend that you go back to the IRS website and look for your client's specific improvement that they're asking about to make sure that you're getting your percentage and your credit limit exactly right for what they are asking about. It has to be obviously residential use. We talked about that already. But for clients that are using part of their home for business, it won't disqualify them from the credit in terms of, taking it as their personal residence improvement. However, the business use of home does have to be below 20% of the overall house square footage. If your client's business use of home it exceeds that 20%, they might still be eligible for part of the credit, but it's going to start to be phased out depending on how much more above 20% they are using their house for business. So just keep that in mind too, if you do have clients that are running their business out of their house. So energy efficient home credits, these are different than renewable energy credits. So if we just kind of pop back here for a second, a lot of what I sort of initially touched on is renewable energy credit qualifications. This 30% of cost up to $3,200 applies to renewable energy credit improvements. Energy efficient home credits is different. It's actually in a different spot on the credit form that you would have to fill out. The limits are a little bit different. So that's why I said make sure that you're going back and making sure that before you advise your client how much of a credit they're going to get, you know exactly which of these two categories their improvement falls into. So the insulation, water heating, geothermal heat pumps, cooling systems, these are just some examples of things that are going to fall into the energy efficient home credits. The credit is significantly smaller. So it's typically 10% of the improvement cost. It used to be up to $500. So if you filed any of these in 2022, the credit was small. It was up to $500. It more than doubles in 2023, and it's up to $1,200 starting this year. So credits that they're going to be taking for 2023 tax returns, definitely higher. These are lifetime limits, though. So also something to keep in mind that if your client took $500 last year and did more improvements this year, they're only going to be able to take up to that 1,200, the difference between the two. So it would be a $700 credit in 2023. Heat pumps, stoves, boilers, I just put that note in there for you. They get more. Don't ask me why, but the IRS has decided, or whoever has decided, that the credits for those specific improvements are going to be higher than these limits. So I'm just going to keep reiterating, when you have a specific improvement in front of you and you want to know specifically what is the limit, what is the amount of the credit that my client is going to get on this particular item, going to defer you back to the IRS website to find that item in the list and look at what those limits are. So I think the takeaway so far is to just understand that there's a lot of different energy improvements, renewable energy improvements, and things that your clients could be doing and are doing in their homes. It's likely that somewhere in there, those improvements are going to qualify for a credit. It's just looking at which one does it qualify for and how much of a tax benefit is my client going to receive from that. Try and make it a little bit more streamlined of a process, because this list does get very long, and it's no wonder that none of us have it completely memorized. So there are business qualifications as well, where businesses would be able to potentially take advantage of some of these credits. Again, keep in mind everything we've talked to you about up to this point is going to be specific to a personal residence, and so it's going to affect an individual tax return. Lori, that is an awesome question. She asked, are the credits available without a Schedule A? Yes, they absolutely are. So it's important to note that they are a credit. They're not a deduction. So they're a dollar for dollar reduction of your client's tax after the tax is calculated. So regardless of whether or not your client itemizes, as long as the improvement is to their existing home, they will still be eligible for the credit. That's an excellent question. Although I am going to talk about in just a minute, maximizing deductions and credits and things like that, especially for businesses. So thank you for that question. So business tax credits are a little bit different. It's not quite the same as a business saying, hey, we put in new windows and doors, we would like a tax credit. Businesses are eligible for some different things. Again, that renewable electricity, so renewable energy investments, investments in biodiesel fuels, low sulfur diesel fuel production, electric vehicles. So especially that one's probably going to be the easiest one, or I guess I should say the most common one, because not all of your clients are necessarily going to be doing investments in biodiesel fuels and things like that. Maybe renewable energy sources in their business buildings, but if you have clients that are purchasing vehicles for owners or have a fleet of vehicles or things like that, and they are purchasing electric vehicles, they will qualify for credits on those vehicle purchases the same way that an individual would. So Here's another link. Again, grab the slide deck out of the chat if you haven't done so already. This is another link to the IRS website. This one is specific to small business and self-employed individual business tax credits, and it will have the full list in there of all of the business tax credits that are available for energy, renewable energy, and energy efficient improvements specific to businesses. So just know that that list is different depending on which client is asking you. So kind of in line with that question around Schedule A, your client, if we kind of go back to the individuals for a second, your client can take that credit on their energy efficient property improvements for their residents, and they can still have itemized deductions on Schedule A. So them just taking that credit does not prohibit them from also taking their mortgage interest deduction, their real estate interest deduction, et cetera. If they are using their business for if they are using their home for business space as well, it would not preclude them from also taking their business use of home deduction. So they can take both of those things. That's something important to keep in mind. Okay, seems like a couple questions on the link for the slide deck. It should be a download PDF file right in the chat. So if you guys are looking for it, go pop into the chat, which is not the same as the question and answer box. And you should see that PDF right in there and you can click to download. If you still don't see it, don't worry, because we will send the full set of slides out to you after the session as well. And Cheryl, good point. So biofuel deduction credits are allowed on the NYS personal individual tax form. Yet, so I didn't really touch on state taxes a lot in this presentation, but I think that that's a really good point, is to keep in mind that there's also going to be individual state considerations for these as well. So your allowances, your limits, what things qualify, what things don't. There might also be a state tax benefit that is different from your federal tax benefit for all of these. So keep that in mind as well if you are in a specific state, that you kind of have two areas that you may want to be researching for this. Okay. Elizabeth, I see your note. Cheska did just put the slide deck back up in chat. And Cheska, I am seeing a note that it says that chat is disabled. So it sounds like the participants aren't able to like hop into chat and interact there. So we'll look at that while I keep going. But again, don't worry, because if you cannot see the slide deck in chat, we are going to send it out to you after the presentation. And I have my contact information at the end of the presentation as well. So you can always use that and ask me, and I'll make sure that everybody gets a copy. So again, with business tax credits, similar to an individual being able to still itemize on their personal tax return as well as taking the credit, a business also is still able to consider depreciating their investment in property in addition to taking credits that are available to them. So that's two considerations that you want to just keep in mind, is that especially if you're tax planning with a client, right? So especially if they're coming to you and they're saying, we're going to do a $50,000 solar investment on our building. What does that do for our tax perspective? So you want to consider their ability to both depreciate that property improvement as well as any credit that may be available for them. Solar is a great one. Where they could get a credit both for their investment into solar or production credits as well, meaning if they are actually able to produce energy from their investment in solar, there's multiple credits that might be available to that business. So just, again, this is a lot. The list is very, very long, which is why I think it feels very convoluted to all of us. And so you just want to keep in the back of your mind that if you have a client that's asking you about something specific, you want to be going back to the IRS website and looking for that specific improvement to get your hard and fast answers as to, what is the tax benefit here. And then don't forget, when you're analyzing these, especially from a business perspective, if we're going to be considering depreciation as well, you don't want to forget about installation and or building costs, meaning that, if we're just looking at the cost of the solar panels themselves, we also want to factor in that that's going to have to be installed on the building. There might have to be specific build out in order to make that investment. So all of those things would be considered normal building improvements that we would be depreciating for that business client. So we don't want to forget to wrap those into our tax planning when we're talking to clients about the benefits of these credits. So what forms do you need to file in terms of the credits actually being taken when you're preparing a tax form? The forms are completely different on the individual tax returns, depending on which credit you are asking for. So it's typically, I think it's 5645 that is going to have those renewable and energy efficient home improvement credits for an individual. But again, depending on the type of credit that you're taking, it could be like any of the 88 or 89 forms. So you just want to make sure that you are looking again, exactly which credit am I looking to take and what is the applicable form for that particular credit. In general, businesses are going to use Form 3800, which is just that very generic form for all business credits. If you Google and pull up a copy of Form 3800, you can also see that kind of high level list of what credits are available for businesses as well. You'll start to see the energy ones listed for you. So still being convoluted, I guess, in terms of what forms to file. Be careful with this as well. Like I said, that you might have two forms. You might have like the initial form to claim the credit, and then there might be an additional information form depending on which improvement your client is actually applying for. So how do we kind of incorporate this into our practice in a way that helps us to add value to our clients and, helps to enhance our tax planning and advisory services? I'm a huge proponent, if you've listened to any of my other webinars, about really bringing value to the conversations with your clients and adding advisory services to practices. I think it's just the best of both worlds for everybody. I think it helps to create happier clients who value our work. And I think that it also makes our jobs easier while giving us an opportunity to add to the bottom line of the practice that we're building. So ways that we can incorporate these things into our practice without making our lives significantly more difficult, because of course I appreciate tax time. We really don't want to add anything else to our to-do list. So I highly encourage you to create a quick reference guide for your clients. You know your client base best. So if your client base is more focused on individual tax versus business tax or vice versa, that will kind of be an indicator of like what information is going to be the best fit for your client base. But creating a quick reference guide of, even just high level, here's a list of potential improvements that might qualify for the credit. If you happen to have put any of these in place in 2023, please contact us because we can help ensure that you're going to get the biggest tax advantage for any one of those things. And so that's something that you could send out to your clients. You could also create a quick reference guide for your team as well. So it's helpful to maybe have a quick reference guide that says, these items qualify for this amount, this percentage. These items qualify for this amount, this percentage. And it could be as simple as just that list that helps to point them in the right direction if they're seeing these things on client tax returns. Always be proactive and make sure that these questions are on organizers or checklists that you send out to your clients. I kind of said at the beginning that I'm surprised by how often I see clients bringing this to us saying, hey, I did XYZ this year. Is that potentially going to qualify for a tax credit? And those questions have really made me realize that we're not super proactive with this credit in asking, because probably more clients are actually doing these types of investments and improvements, and they just didn't know that a tax credit was available to them because I never asked, whether or not they had done it and then educated them on what was available to them. So that's always a super easy way to make your clients happier, is to just ask a simple question that helps to save them some money, especially because, like I said, the credits are dollar for dollar reductions of tax itself. They are not deductions, and they might still be able to take deductions in addition to the credit. So just putting something as simple as, did you do any home improvements this year? Did you do any energy or, physical improvements to your business space this year? That might be the simplest way to just kind of start the conversation. If a client says yes, that gives you the opportunity to follow up and just have a quick conversation about what did those improvements look like, and let's make sure that we don't miss the opportunity to take advantage of a tax credit. So obviously training your team a little bit as well. That quick reference guide can be helpful to them, letting them know that you're going to add this question to checklists and questionnaires. So they should be prepared to follow up with the clients that say yes and ask them what type of improvements they did during the year. And also you want to look for what type of documentation is the firm going to need to be able to prepare the tax return. So that might vary a little bit depending on what types of credits that you're seeing coming back, but just start to make sure that your team is aware of what things to ask for. Do you need invoices and receipts? Do they need to check to make sure that labor costs were included? Do they need to have the certificate of energy efficiency on certain things? Some of the improvements do, especially the home ones, do require that actual certificate of energy efficiency on whatever product your client is trying to use to claim the credit. And we want to make sure that we're advising our clients, hey, you need to have that information kept as part of your tax documentation for however long you need to keep it for. Yeah, Cheryl, great question. Some of them do and some of them don't. It really depends. She's asking, wouldn't most tax organizers already include these questions? Some of them do and some of them don't. It really depends on what software you're using. I also know smaller firms don't necessarily use auto-generated organizers from tax software itself. So it's just a consideration to keep in mind. Not all of them have it on there, so they're not all automatically being proactive for you. And then add this to part of your tax planning discussions as well. So if you have clients that you are providing tax planning services for, where you're meeting with them before the end of the year to talk about ways to save money, to talk about their projection of their tax liability, this is a really simple question that you can ask, especially if you have a client that's sensitive to trying to lower their tax liability. Is, hey, have you done any of these things with your home or your business during the year? And if not, do you have any plans to do any of them next year? Because that's a really easy way to rope that into your tax planning conversations. So I will give it just a minute. We only have about 3 minutes left. If there's any questions that you still have that I didn't answer, please pop them into the chat box. George, you're so welcome. I always appreciate all of you being here. Hopefully this is helpful. I know that it's really high level, but like I said, I think this is something that, especially in tax season, or even now at the end of the year where our stress and anxiety is starting to anticipate what tax season is going to look like, these are really very easy value add questions that we can be having conversations with our clients about. And they're just not top of mind to ask because we're already so concerned about the really big things. And so this is just a reminder that these exist, that they can be incredibly advantageous to your clients. And sometimes just asking that question is a really easy way to make them happy and feel like, you are really proactively looking at ways to help them during tax time. So, okay, it looks like we resolved the issue with the chat. So again, if you didn't get a chance to at the beginning of the presentation, please pop into the chat and download the copy of the slides. It does have both IRS hyperlinks in there for you as quick reference guides to the credits. It has full lists in there in terms of what credits are available, what forms to file for each credit, what qualifies and doesn't qualify, all the limits, etc. And this is my contact information as well. So if you think of any questions after today's presentation and you need to contact me for anything, please feel free. Always happy to field questions, or if you have an idea for next month's webinar that you would really like to see content on, I'm happy to take that as well. So we are right about at 12:30. I'll give it about 10 more seconds for any last minute questions, but otherwise, thank you all so much for being here. I always appreciate it. Awesome. Perfect. Doesn't look like we have any more questions. So thank you all so much. And I will see you for next month's tax talk. And I hope everybody has a great day.